Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Research Podcast. Today we are looking at something that feels a little less like a news headline and a little more like the opening chapter of a high-stakes techno thriller. We are diving deep into a rapidly developing situation involving the US, Israel, and Iran. And honestly, just looking at this stack of reports, the tension is practically vibrating off the page.
It is a tense board,
Yeah.
to say the very least. I mean, we're seeing military movements that are, well, they're unprecedented. The rhetoric is escalating,
Yeah.
and there are some very specific, very chilling details coming out of the region.
Exactly. And speaking of chilling details, let's just start with the hook that grabbed me immediately when I was going through the research. We have these reports, right, of the Israeli Aviation Authority allegedly warning airlines, specifically European carriers, to avoid their airspace.
Right.
But it wasn't a general, be careful for the next month. It was for a very specific window, January 30th to February 1st.
That has a very specific, very narrow window.
Right. It just screams 0 hour to me. I mean, when you tell commercial airliners who run on these tight margins and strict schedules to clear out for 48 hours, you're not doing it for a drill.
No, absolutely not. You're clearing the board. It implies a schedule. And when you combine that date with the other major piece of the puzzle, this case of the ghost carrier, it paints a pretty intense picture.
Okay, let's unpack this ghost carrier situation because I love that term, but the reality of it is even stranger. We're talking about the USS Abraham Lincoln.
A Nimitz-class aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
So, one of the most powerful mobile air bases on the entire planet.
So this carrier was in the South China Sea, standard stuff, projecting power, but then it starts moving toward the Arabian Gulf. And here is where it gets weird. As it approaches the region, it reportedly goes into ghost mode.
Which means it turned off its AIS, its automatic identification system.
Is that normal? I mean, do carriers usually just disappear from the map like that? Don't they want people to see them to show force?
Not always. Look, AIS is primarily a safety protocol, right?
Yeah.
To stop you from colliding with commercial traffic.
Yeah.
In peacetime or during standard patrols, yeah, you leave it on.
Okay.
But turning off your transponders when you're moving from one strategic theater to another, specifically as you approach the Gulf, that is a signal. It's called emissions control, or EMCON.
So basically, we are entering stealth mode.
Exactly. It signals two things. First, operational security is now the top priority. They don't want open source intelligence, people tracking ships on public websites, to know exactly where they are.
Right.
And second, it implies they are moving into a pre-strike position.
The Guardian actually reported on this. They mentioned its last known location was somewhere near the Bay of Bengal around January 18th before it just vanished. And the assumption is it's now parked somewhere very strategic, within striking distance of Iran.
And likely moving constantly. You don't park a carrier when you're in ghost mode. You keep it moving to make targeting basically impossible. But the location, honestly, is secondary to the payload. We need to really dig into what is sitting on the flight deck of the Abraham Lincoln because that changes the entire calculation.
Yeah, let's get into the toys. Because we've seen U.S. jets in the region before. We've got reports of F-15s landing in Jordan. But the research says that Abraham Lincoln brought something very different to the party.
It's a crucial distinction that a lot of general reporting just misses. The F-15s we were seeing in Jordan, that's likely the F-15 Strike Eagle, they are incredible workhorses, fast, heavy payload.
Sure.
But in this context, they are largely defensive. They're excellent at intercepting drones, shooting down cruise missiles. Think of them as the shield for Israel and U.S. bases.
Okay, so the F-15 is the linebacker protecting the quarterback. What's on the Abraham Lincoln?
The USS Abraham Lincoln is carrying the F-35C. That is the naval variant of the Joint Strike Fighter.
And why is that a big deal? Is it just a newer plane?
It's not just newer. It's a fundamental shift in strategy. The F-35C is a stealth platform designed for day one of a war.
Day one? What does that mean?
In military doctrine, day one is when the enemy's air defenses are still fully active. The F-35 is designed to penetrate sophisticated networks, like the Russian-made S-300 or S-400 systems that Iran operates without being seen.
Ah, okay.
It gathers intelligence, it jams radar, and it strikes deep inside enemy territory to blind them. You don't bring F-35Cs just to shoot down slow-moving drones. You bring them if you think you might need to kick down the door.
That puts a totally different spin on it. It's not just we are here to protect, it's we are here to strike if we have to.
Precisely. And you have to consider the endurance factor here. The sources highlight that the USS Abraham Lincoln, along with the USS Theodore Roosevelt, has been at sea for roughly 295 days.
Whoa, almost 300 days at sea. That
Yeah.
sounds exhausting.
It's incredibly rare. Standard deployments are usually 6, maybe 7 months. Keeping a carrier group at sea for 10 months puts immense strain on the crew, the reactors, the catapults. I mean, everything breaks down eventually.
So why keep them out there? Why not rotate them home and bring in fresh ships?
Because you don't want a gap in coverage. Keeping them there, pushing that endurance to the breaking point, suggests the Pentagon believes a specific window of opportunity or danger is open right now. They are holding the line until the operation, whatever it might be, is concluded.
And it's not just the planes, right? The research mentioned minesweepers.
Yes. The U.S. has reportedly deployed 3 minesweepers off the coast of the UAE.
Oh.
Now, this might sound like some old-school World War II tech, but it's absolutely vital.
Why is that?
Because they are anticipating Iran's classic countermove.
Blocking the oil.
Right. If Iran feels threatened, or if they're attacked, their doctrine often involves threatening the Strait of Hormuz, the choke point, for about 20% of the world's oil supply. They threaten to dump naval mines in the water to stop the tankers and crash the global economy.
So by pre-positioning minesweepers, the U.S. is essentially saying, we know your move, and we're already ready to clear the board.
It's a way of neutralizing Iran's leverage before the shooting even starts. It takes away their biggest bargaining chip.
So we have the ghost carrier with the stealth jets, the minesweepers ready to clear the strait. It begs the question, what is the actual plan here? Because one of the reports mentioned something called the Venezuela Model.
This is a really fascinating bit of geopolitical strategy. The reporting suggests that Trump and the administration strategists are looking for a low-cost, clean, and fast operation.
Okay.
They aren't looking for an Iraq-style invasion with boots on the ground and a 20-year occupation.
Right, nobody wants that. But what does the Venezuela model actually mean in this context? Because when I think of Venezuela, I think of economic collapse, not military strikes.
Well, think back to the pressure campaign on Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. It wasn't an invasion, it was a suffocating siege.
Okay, let's unpack that. How do you siege a country without surrounding it with tanks?
You do it financially and logistically. You use that naval power we just discussed to enforce a total blockade. You ensure not a single barrel of oil leaves Iranian ports. You cut off their access to international banking. You freeze their assets.
And you combine that with kinetic threats.
Exactly. Precise strikes on key infrastructure or leadership figures.
So the theory is, instead of bombing the whole country, you strangle the economy and threaten the leadership directly.
Precisely. It's the siege theory. The goal is to force a collapse of the regime from the inside, or a total capitulation, without the messy, expensive reality of a ground war. You make it impossible for the regime to pay its soldiers or run its power plants.
It sounds cleaner on paper, but I imagine the reality is pretty messy. And obviously, Israel is a huge part of this equation. We saw reports that General Brad Cooper from U.S. Central Command was in Israel recently.
That visit is significant. General Cooper isn't there for a courtesy call. His presence mirrors the preparations we saw before previous conflicts in the region.
Yeah.
It implies very high-level coordination on, say, target lists and defense.
And Israel seems to be sharpening its sword, too. The sources mentioned they've replenished their interceptors.
They've restocked the Arrow 3 systems, which are their long-range missile interceptors. But even more interesting is the mention of the Iron Beam.
The laser system. I feel like we've been hearing about lasers for years. Is it actually real this time?
It seems to be. The reports suggest they are rushing it into operational status. And this matters because of economics.
Well, so.
Shooting down a cheap drone with a $2 million Patriot missile is a losing game. You run out of money before they run out of drones.
Right.
The Iron Beam. It costs the price of the electricity to fire it. Maybe a few dollars per shot.
So it's basically infinite ammo.
Effectively, yes. If they are rushing that system to the front lines, it means they're preparing for a massive volume of incoming fire swarms of drones, and they need a cheap way to stop them.
Which brings us right back to that warning. The Israeli Aviation Authority telling airlines to stay away for 48 hours.
You have to understand the economics of that. Israel's economy relies heavily on being connected to the world. Warning airlines to stop flying even for 2 days costs millions, maybe billions in lost trade and tourism, not to mention the panic it causes.
Yeah.
You do not issue that warning as a bluff. You do it because you genuinely believe the sky's about to be full of metal.
So we have the U.S. and Israel locked and loaded, but let's look at the target. Why now? Why is this happening at this specific moment? The sources paint a picture of a regime in Iran that is, well, it seems like it's crumbling.
That is the argument being made. If you look at the internal dynamics of Iran right now, the regime is arguably in its weakest state since the revolution.
One thing that really stuck out to me was the leadership void. We keep hearing about these new commanders.
It's a critical point. Over the last few years, and specifically in recent months, a significant number of senior, battle-hardened IRGC commanders have been killed or assassinated.
So the guys running the show now, they're rookies.
Relatively speaking, yeah. They're described as new players. They might be loyal, but they lack the decades of experience in asymmetric warfare that their predecessors had. And perhaps more importantly, they are operating in an environment of extreme paranoia.
Because of the Mossad infiltration?
Right. The reports cite that Israeli intelligence hasn't just scratched the surface. They've penetrated deep. We're talking about allegations that they have assets within the inner circles of Commander Hossein Salami, the head of the IRGC.
Wow.
Imagine trying to run a war when you can't trust the person sitting next to you in the bunker.
That has to be paralyzing. But it's not just the military leadership. The situation on the streets sounds absolutely horrific. The sources mention some shocking stats from Time magazine about the protests.
This is the human cost that often gets buried under all the military analysis. Time magazine cited sources claiming that in just 2 days of crackdowns, specifically November 8th and 9th, there were potentially 30,000 deaths.
Wait, hold on. 30,000 in 2 days?
Yes.
That's the population of a small town. That sounds almost impossible.
It is a staggering figure. And, we have to be careful with numbers in the fog of conflict. But the report alleges that the regime was disposing of bodies specifically to hide the scale of the massacre.
Wow.
So whether the number is exactly 30,000 or simply many thousands, the point is the scale of the brutality.
It's hard to even wrap your head around that level of violence in 48 hours.
It indicates a regime that is absolutely terrified. You don't kill that many people unless you think you are losing control.
And the sources say this is a red line for Trump.
That's the narrative. That while the geopolitical strategy is about deterrence, the justification, the sort of moral impetus for this siege, is that the regime is slaughtering its own people. There are anecdotes in the source material about horrific treatment of women for minor offenses, heavy weaponry used against Kurdish regions. It just paints a picture of a government that is at war with its own population.
So you have a regime that is terrified of its own people, paranoid about spies, and led by inexperienced commanders. It sounds like a house of cards. But, and this is a big but, they still have claws. If the U.S. or Israel strikes, what does Iran do?
This is the counterpunch.
Yeah.
And it's the reason this hasn't happened yet. Iran isn't toothless. We need to talk about the Fatah too.
The hypersonic missile. I keep seeing this name pop up.
Yes. The sources describe it as a hypersonic missile capable of Mach 13.
Mach 13. That's 13 times the speed of sound.
Correct. But the danger isn't just the speed, it's the maneuverability. See, traditional ballistic missiles, they go up and they come down in a predictable arc. You can do the math and know exactly where they will be. A hypersonic glide vehicle, like the Fatah 2, can change course in the atmosphere. It maneuvers erratically.
Which makes it hard to shoot down.
Exactly. It makes it incredibly difficult for systems like the Patriot or even the Arrow to calculate an intercept solution.
So could they sink a carrier? Could they hit the Abraham Lincoln with one of these?
That is the million-dollar question. But the expert analysis in our sources points out a key limitation, what they call the targeting problem.
Okay, let's unpack that. Why is it hard to hit a carrier if you have a guided missile?
Because a carrier is a moving city. It travels at 30-plus knots. It never sits still. To hit it with a missile, even a hypersonic one, you need to know exactly where it is in real time. If you launch a missile at where the carrier was 10 minutes ago, you're going to hit open water.
And if the Abraham Lincoln is in ghost mode and moving constantly?
Then finding it is the hard part. It's called the kill chain. You have to find, fix, track, target, and engage.
Yeah.
If you can't find the ship in the middle of the ocean because its radar is off, your fancy hypersonic missile is pretty much useless.
So having a fancy missile doesn't matter if you can't aim it. That makes sense. However, Iran doesn't just threaten ships. There was a very alarming claim attributed to Netanyahu in the sources.
Yeah, the Washington threat. That sounded, well, terrifying.
It did. Netanyahu reportedly claimed that Iran might have a missile capable of reaching Washington, D.C., or even Miami, specifically mentioning Mar-a-Lago.
It's a bold claim.
Is that real? Does Iran actually have an ICBM that can fly 8,000 kilometers?
Well, the sources mentioned reports that Russia may have allowed Iran to test an 8,000-kilometer range missile in Siberia. Now, we have to look at this critically. Is it a fully operational weapon sitting in a silo ready to launch? Maybe, maybe not.
Or is it psychological warfare?
It could be psychological warfare designed to make the American public think twice.
It just feels like a massive risk for them. I mean, if they launched a missile at Washington,
That's the Japan scenario that gets mentioned in the sources.
meaning Pearl Harbor.
Exactly. If Iran were to strike the U.S. homeland, the response wouldn't be a Venezuela Model siege. It wouldn't be sanctions. It would be total devastation. It would be an existential end to the Iranian state. Most analysts believe the regime, while desperate, is rational enough to know that striking the U.S. mainland is suicide.
But the threat of it.
The threat of it, that's a powerful bargaining chip.
Speaking of bargaining chips, is there any room for diplomacy here? Or are we past the point of no return? The sources mentioned Jared Kushner.
Yes, the Jared Kushner angle. Reports suggest he has been trying to find a diplomatic off-ramp, claiming he has access to the Iranian foreign minister, Abbas Araki,
So a backdoor channel.
essentially.
Hmm.
But the dilemma, as our sources point out, is that the cupboard is bare. Neither side really has anything left to trade.
What do you mean?
The U.S. wants absolute deterrence, basically, stop being a threat.
Yeah.
Iran wants sanctions relief, but refuses to negotiate while they are being threatened.
Yeah.
It's a deadlock. You can't negotiate when one side's starting position is surrender.
And meanwhile, the rest of the world is just watching. This isn't just about the U.S. and Iran.
No, not at all. The global players are very much involved. Look at China.
The sources mentioned China making moves near Taiwan right as the carrier left.
Exactly. As the USS Abraham Lincoln left the South China Sea to head to the Gulf, China immediately started conducting maneuvers near Taiwan. It suggests a coordinated distraction. They know the U.S. can't be everywhere at once. If the U.S. gets bogged down in a massive war in the Middle East, that opens a window for China in the Pacific.
That is a scary thought, a two-front crisis. And what about the neighbors? Saudi Arabia, the UAE?
They are terrified. They are the ones in the splash zone. If shooting starts, Iranian missiles might not hit Washington, but they could very easily hit Dubai or Riyadh. We're already seeing European carriers canceling flights to the Gulf states. The economic anxiety there is palpable. They don't want to be collateral damage in a fight between Washington and Tehran.
It really feels like all the pieces are set for something big. We've got the ghost carrier, the hypersonic threats, the internal collapse of the regime. So as we wrap things up, what does this all mean?
If we summarize the zero-hour scenario, we're looking at a convergence. You have supreme military readiness from the U.S. and Israel. You have an Iranian regime that is internally weaker than it has ever been. And you have a U.S. administration that seems determined to reestablish deterrence, possibly through this siege strategy.
It feels like we are standing on the edge of a cliff. I mean, this could be the final chapter for the current Iranian regime,
Or the start of a protracted, messy regional war that drags in everyone from the Gulf states to potentially Russia and China.
Which leads me to the question I want to leave our listeners with today. We talked about the Venezuela model, this idea of a clean, low-cost siege. But warfare is rarely clean.
It never is.
So here is the provocative question. If the plan is a clean siege, what happens if Iran refuses to play by those rules? What happens if a desperate regime with its back against the wall decides to burn the whole board rather than fold? Is the world actually ready for what that looks like?
That is the question that should keep everyone up at night.
And on that note, we want you to stay curious. Don't just read the headlines. Look at the map. Look at the movements. Keep questioning the narratives.
Absolutely. The truth is usually in the details they don't put in the breaking news banner.
Make sure you subscribe to the Deep Research podcast so you don't miss our next deep dive. We're going to be watching this situation very, very closely.
Until next time, keep analyzing.